You live well, Scaramanga.
At $1 million a contract, I can afford to, Mr. Bond. You work for peanuts. A hearty well done from Her Majesty the Queen and a pittance of a pension. Apart from that, we are the same.
What do you know about a man called Scaramanga, 007?
The man with the golden gun. Born in a circus, father the ringmaster, possibly Cuban, mother English, a snake charmer. He was a spectacular trick shot artist by the time he was 10 and a local Rio gunman at 15. The KGB recruited him there and trained him in Europe, where he became an overworked, underpaid assassin. Current price, $1 million a hit. He always uses a golden bullet, hence man with the golden gun.
It was sent with a note requesting special delivery to you. So I think it's fair to assume that he has the edge on you.
If I found him first, sir, that might change the situation.
Dramatically.
Dum-dum bullets like this flatten on impact for maximum wounding effect.
But just tell me where it was made and by whom.
Lazar?
Lazar?
Well, what the hell is Lazar?
Chap who made the bullet, 007.
Here you will find only craftsmanship and quality.
In gold, if I wanted.
I have already done that for a client.
I know you have. Francisco Scaramanga.
I have just completed an order for immediate delivery.
Who collects them?
I swear I do not know. My instructions are to go to the casino, I am paid, and they vanish.
Oh, you're hurting my arm.
I'll break it unless you tell me where those bullets go.
You'll kill me.
His eye is on me. Where can I find him?
I don't know.
I said where? We have so much in common, Mr. Bond. We have so much to discuss, and we will never have this opportunity again.
I admit killing you would be a pleasure.
You should have done that when you first saw me. But then, of course, the English don't consider it sporting to kill in cold blood, do they?
Don't count on that.
This is the part I really like.
I know you!
Oh, no.
You're that secret agent!
He will literally have the sun in his pocket. A monopoly on solar power.
Kill me!
The Man with the Golden Gun arrived in December of 1974, just a year after Roger Moore's first appearance as 007 in Live and Let Die. Again directed by Guy Hamilton on an estimated budget of $7 million. The reviews were mixed on the latest entry into the franchise, but that didn't deter the fans from seeing the film, with it earning over $97 million worldwide, which was still big numbers for the time, especially when ticket sales were down during this part of the decade. Fans at the time pointed out that it had a bit of a limp advertising campaign, with the poster looking very similar to Live and Let Die, and only a few products were available, such as the soundtrack, paperback book, and the James Bond pistol in gold, looking very different to the weapon used by Scaramanga. There was also a promotion to encourage people to drink more milk, with the cast and crew drinking it on set. It's quite amusing seeing one of the crew turn up with a tray of pints of milk. It's sort of a cheap round. The press were mostly negative towards the film. You get a great sense reading back through the old reviews that the critics were getting tired of James Bond and felt there was not much new to offer, and the 007 producers were just going through the motions with these films, and the energy in the series had started to wane. The Guardian newspaper said the script is the limpest of the lot, and Roger Moore as 007 is the last man on Earth to make it sound better than it is. Christopher Lee was praised for making a goodish villain, and Britt Ekland as a passable Mary Goodnight, and it was up to scratch in production values. The film otherwise merely a pot boiler. Maybe enough's enough. The Observer said this series, which had been scraping the bottom of the barrel for some time, is now through the bottom, with depressing borrowings from Hong Kong kung fu movies due to the success of Bruce Lee, not to mention even more depressing echoes of the carry-on smut. The critics summed up the film by saying it was sadly lacking in wit or imagination. On a more slightly positive note, the Sunday Mirror said The Man with the Golden Gun isn't the best Bond ever, but Saltzman and Broccoli can still produce such slick and inventive entertainment. and Cinefantastique magazine said the film is entertaining and has all the gloss of its predecessors, but Roger Moore's interpretation of the character is so low-keyed that it is a wonder he is any threat whatever to his opponents. Roger Moore walks through the role, and the audience never feels that his Bond is in any danger. With it being a big success to hardcore fans of Bond, especially those who admired Ian Fleming's writing, they still weren't happy with Roger Moore in the role, and they were displeased with Christopher Lee's sympathetic performance, complaining he was too charming as Scaramanga. It's interesting now over the years that Moore has a stronger fanbase, and Christopher Lee's performance as Scaramanga is considered one of the best villains of the 007 series. At the end of Live and Let Die, it was announced that James Bond would return in The Man with the Golden Gun, which was the last book written by Ian Fleming, published by Jonathan Cape in the UK on the 1st of April 1965, 8 months after the author's death. The novel was not as detailed or polished as the others in this series, leading to underwhelming reviews. Despite that, the book was a bestseller. Producers Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman intended to follow You Only Live Twice with The Man with the Golden Gun, inviting Roger Moore to play 007, knowing that Connery had finished with the role. However, Moore was committed to the Saint, and issues with the location they wanted to use led to the production being cancelled, so they changed direction and went with On Her Majesty's Secret Service, with George Lazenby as Bond. Lazenby's next Bond film, Saltzman told a reporter, would be either The Man with the Golden Gun or Diamonds Are Forever. The producers would choose the latter, with Sean Connery returning for one more time as Bond after Lazenby's resignation. United Artists were going through financial problems, and the studio head wanted to get UA back into profitability, and greenlit another James Bond film after viewing dailies of Roger Moore's performance in Live and Let Die, and wanted The Man with the Golden Gun out the following year, giving the producers a very short turnaround, which wasn't uncommon as the first 4 Bond films had a 1-year turnaround, but the majority would be given 2 years. Broccoli wasn't happy but went along with their decision. Guy Hamilton was asked to come back as the director, but he was reluctant at first and wanted a change of scenery, and the UK tax rate was getting very high, and he wanted to leave the country. Another reason he didn't want to do another one was down to the producers. Broccoli and Saltzman at this point hated each other. Guy liked and respected both of them and could happily work with them separately, but when they were together it was a nightmare. Guy would eventually be persuaded as the producers gave him more creative freedom. The film would have little resemblance to the book and its story. The novel is mostly set in Jamaica, which had been already used in the earlier films such as Dr. No and Live and Let Die. The Man with the Golden Gun would have Bond in either the Far East or the Middle East for the second time. The production team chose Thailand as their primary location, following a suggestion of production designer Peter Merton, after viewing images in a magazine and found some great locations. During the reconnaissance of locations in Hong Kong, Broccoli saw the wreckage of the former RMS Queen Elizabeth and came up with the idea of using it as the base for MI6's Far East operations. Tom Mankiewicz, probably best known for his work on Superman the movie in 1978, co-wrote the script to Diamonds Are Forever and penned the one for Live and Let Die, and was asked again to begin work on the first draft of The Man with the Golden Gun in 1973, delivering a script that was a battle of wills between Bond and Scaramanga. But tensions began to rise between Mankiewicz and director Guy Hamilton. They both admitted they got on really well on the previous 2 Bond films, but Guy felt Tom working alone in the UK had changed him, and upon catching up in Hong Kong they were just short-tempered with each other. Tom had a growing sense that he was feeling tapped out on Bond, and told Broccoli that he had done all he could on the script and left, which led to the reintroduction of Richard Maybaum. Maybaum had worked on 6 Bond films previously and was asked to deliver his own draft based on Mankiewicz's work. Much of the plot involving Scaramanga being Bond's equal was sidelined in later drafts. Plot B of the script was introduced, taking ideas of the 1973 energy crisis, which was a result of the cost of crude oil, allowing the MacGuffin of the Solix agitator as an alternative energy source that would end up being used as a weapon. Tom Mankiewicz would eventually be brought back and was asked to rewrite Maybaum's script, as Richard was getting frustrated with the constant requests for changes, and the actors had started ad-libbing on set, changing the dialogue. Tom spiced up the humour and introduced Lieutenant Hip, and brought back Sheriff J.W. Pepper, at the request of Guy Hamilton. The Bond producers were always eager to capture what was popular at the time. Live and Let Die borrowed heavily from the blaxploitation genre. The Man with the Golden Gun borrowed from the martial arts genre that was popular in the 1970s thanks to Bruce Lee, and the worldwide success of Enter the Dragon. For the cast, we have returning actors with Sir Roger Moore as 007, Lois Maxwell as Miss Moneypenny, Desmond Llewellyn as Q, Bernard Lee as M, and we have a new member at MI6 with James Cossins as Culthorpe. He is MI6's armaments expert who identifies the maker of Scaramanga's golden bullets. Some of you may remember James from Fawlty Towers, as Basil gets him confused with the hotel inspector, a classic episode. Basil! The legend that is Sir Christopher Lee plays Francisco Scaramanga, an assassin who is identified by his use of a golden gun and has a third nipple. This role originally was considered for Jack Palance, who Tom Mankiewicz had envisioned for the role, but he turned it down. Christopher Lee, who was eventually cast, was Ian Fleming's step-cousin. Scaramanga in the book is a far different character to how Lee plays him. In the book, he is a more thuggish, silent character. Britt Ekland plays Mary Goodnight, Bond's assistant. Ekland had been interested in playing a Bond girl since she had seen Dr. No, and contacted the producers about the main role of Mary Goodnight, and to her luck she was cast. Ekland had been previously married to Peter Sellers, who appeared in the 1967 Bond film Casino Royale. Maud Adams plays Andrea Anders, Scaramanga's mistress. Guy Hamilton met Adams in New York and cast her, saying she was elegant and beautiful, that it seemed to me she was the perfect Bond girl. The Man with the Golden Gun was the first of 2 Bond films in which Maud Adams appeared. She played a different character, Octopussy, in the 1983 film of the same name. Harvey Villachez plays Knick Knack, who was originally a painter who turned to acting. He plays Scaramanga's manservant and accomplice. Harvey was later known to television audiences as Tattoo in the series Fantasy Island. Harvey was living out of his car before working on Bond, and getting the role in Golden Gun was a big deal for him and got him out of a bad spot. He had a strong appetite for the women, spending most nights partying. Roger said Harvey was a sex maniac. He later had roles in Forbidden Zone and Airplane 2. Clifton James returns to play Sheriff J.W. Pepper, who happens to be on holiday in Thailand. Clifton would also play a cop again in Superman 2, though played more straight. Richard Liu plays High Fat, a Thai millionaire industrialist who has employed Scaramanga to assassinate the inventor of the Solex agitator so he can steal the device. In the original script by Tom Mankiewicz, High Fat had a brother called Low Fat, and he based him on the famous Hong Kong film producer Run Ron Shaw and his brother, but the brother idea was dropped in later drafts. Soon Taek Ho plays Lieutenant Hip, Bond's local contact in Hong Kong and Bangkok. Soon Taek Ho trained in martial arts for the role, and his voice was partially dubbed over in the film. He will later appear in Death Wish 4, Beverly Hills Ninja and Mulan. And finally we have Mark Lawrence as Rodney, an American gangster who attempts to outshoot Scaramanga in his funhouse and loses. Lawrence also appeared in Diamonds Are Forever. Guy Hamilton found it an interesting idea to put sort of a Chicago gangster in the middle of Thailand. Filming commenced in early November of 1973 with a skeleton crew, only 8 months after they wrapped on Live and Let Die, making use of locations in Hong Kong for the submerged wreck with a double for Roger. The major part of principal photography started in April of 1974 in Thailand, with the Dragon Garden as the estate of High Fat, which portrayed a location in Bangkok, and Scaramanga's hideout located in Phuket, which is often now referred to as the James Bond Island, both by locals and in tourist guidebooks. Bond's duel with Scaramanga, which Mankiewicz said was inspired by the climactic face-off in Shane, was shortened as the producers felt it was causing major pacing problems. The original teaser trailer, which was edited by Maurice Binder, who designed the opening credits and handled all the marketing and trailers up until A View to a Kill, featured some of the cut scenes where Bond creates a Molotov cocktail, which is shot out of the sky by Scaramanga using his only bullet. But he has another one on him, making him a cheat. Christopher Lee later on said it was a shame that this scene was cut out. 3 Golden Gun props were made, a solid piece, one that could be fired with a cap, and one that could be assembled and disassembled, although Christopher Lee said that the process was extremely difficult. The gun consisted of interlocking fountain pen, the barrel, cigarette lighter, the bullet chamber, cigarette case, the handle, and the cufflink as the trigger, with the bullet secured in Scaramanga's belt buckle. The famous stunt in the film where we see Bond drive over a bridge and the car spins during a 360 was first tested as a computer simulation to see if it could be done. The stunt was performed by Lauren Bumps Willett as James Bond, driving an AMC Hornet, leaping a broken bridge doing an aerial twist. Willett successfully completed the jump on the first take. Composer John Barry added a slide whistle sound effect over the stunt, which Broccoli kept in despite thinking it reduced the effect of the stunt. John Barry later regretted his decision, thinking the whistle broke the golden rule, as the stunt was, for what it was all worth, a truly dangerous moment, true James Bond style. The sound effect was described as simply crass, and to this day a bugbear for many 007 fans. Academy Award winner Oswald Morris was hired to finish the job, after the original cinematographer Ted Moore became ill. Morris was initially reluctant, as he did not like his previous experiences taking over someone else's work, but accepted after dinner with Broccoli as he was offered a large salary to finish off the shoot. After filming wrapped in Thailand, the production moved to studio work at Pinewood Studios. This included sets such as Scaramanga's solar energy plant and island interior. Guy Hamilton wanted Scaramanga's hideout to have this Disneyland-inspired funhouse. The funhouse was designed to be a place where Scaramanga could get the upper hand by distracting his adversaries with obstacles such as waxworks that fire at those against Scaramanga. It's a funny scene because it's actors with wax-like makeup on, but they blink and wobble as they struggle to stand still. Roger struggles as well. It's very difficult to not move, especially in the position Roger is in. For Scaramanga's solar power plant, Guy Hamilton used both the Pinewood set and a miniature produced by legendary FX master Derek Meddings. Often cutting between the two, you can barely tell what is a miniature. During Goodnight's and Bond's escape, Britt Ekland was really scared of the explosions and, wearing barely anything at all, trips up and refuses to get back up. The shot is left in the film. Roger picks her up and shouts, "We gotta go!" as it will mess up the shot and they will get hurt by the explosions if they mess up the timing. Production wrapped at Pinewood in August of 1974. This would be the final Bond film to be co-produced by Harry Saltzman, as his partnership with Broccoli was dissolved after the film's release, as their relationship could not be repaired. Harry Saltzman would sell his 50% stake in Eon Productions' parent company Danjaq to United Artists to alleviate his financial problems. Guy Hamilton again was in talks to direct the next Bond film, The Spy Who Loved Me, with it aiming for a 1976 release, but that job went to Lewis Gilbert. The resulting legalities of Saltzman selling his stake delayed production of the next Bond film for 3 years, with it arriving in the summer of 1977. Guy Hamilton, years later, did an interview a year before his death in 2015 and said the only Bond film he regretted making was The Man with the Golden Gun. For the film's plot, the film opens with a gangster visiting Francisco Scaramanga with an order to kill him and collect a bounty. But he is directed into a funhouse section of the estate by Knick-Knack, where Scaramanga eventually retrieves his golden gun and kills him. In London, a golden bullet etched with 007 is received by MI6. It is believed to have been sent by Scaramanga, but because no one knows of his appearance outside of having a third nipple, M relieves Bond of his current mission, involving tracking an energy scientist named Gibson, who has created a device to combat the global energy crisis. Bond sets out unofficially to locate Scaramanga, first by retrieving a spent golden bullet from a belly dancer in Beirut. He traces the bullet to a gunmaker in Macau and forces him to reveal how he ships the bullets. Bond follows the shipment carried to Hong Kong by Scaramanga's mistress. Bond's assistant Mary Goodnight arrives later to Bond's frustration and tells her to follow Andrea's car. At the hotel room, he coerces her to expose information about Scaramanga. She directs Bond to the Bottoms Up Club. Bond waits outside but is unaware of Scaramanga, who snipes Gibson when he steps out, and Knick-Knack steals the Solex off his body. Bond is arrested by Lieutenant Hip for having a weapon, but instead of going to the station, he is transported to the wreck of the RMS Queen Elizabeth, where he meets M and Q, and is assigned to work with Hip, who had just had a meeting with Gibson to retrieve the Solex agitator. Bond travels to Bangkok to meet Hai Fat, a wealthy Thai entrepreneur suspected of arranging Gibson's murder. Posing as Scaramanga by showing off his fake third nipple, Bond is invited to dinner, but his plans backfire, as Scaramanga himself is operating at Fat's estate. Bond is captured and taken to Fat's martial arts academy, where the students are instructed to kill him. Escaping with the aid of Hip and his nieces, Bond escapes on a motorised sampan along the river. Scaramanga subsequently kills Fat with his golden gun and assumes control of his empire and the Solex. Later that night, Bond reunites with Mary Goodnight, but Anders interrupts their time together and agrees to help Bond and get the Solex back from Scaramanga. Due to her betrayal, Scaramanga kills her and escapes with the Solex, and Goodnight is kidnapped and taken away in his flying car. With Goodnight taken, it gives Bond the chance to track her and reveal Scaramanga's hidden location. John Barry again returns to the Bond series, making it his 7th score for the franchise. John Barry produced a score over a 3-week period, which may seem short for a film score to be delivered, but other Bond scores had been completed in an even shorter amount of time. On Diamonds Are Forever, Barry changed his style, moving away from the heavy horn-based sound of the 1960s to a smoother string-based sound. The Man with the Golden Gun was also the first to drop the distinctive plucked guitar from the Bond theme, heard over the gun barrel sequence. In all subsequent John Barry James Bond scores, this theme would be heard on strings and trumpets. Barry would do a brief reprise of the song Live and Let Die when Sheriff J.W. Pepper appears on screen. John Barry and lyricist Don Black would choose the singer to provide the song for the films, and they picked Lulu. Singer Alice Cooper voluntarily chose to produce his own song once he heard the news the new film was in production. It's a pretty good track, but it doesn't really have that James Bond flavour to it, and it would have been quite jarring for the fanbase and I think the general public if it had been used officially. His song would appear on his album Muscle of Love. Lulu's title song is notable for having suggestive lyrics. The writer of the song, Don Black, felt hampered by the title, and if he would do it again, it would be tucked away in the middle of the song. For the first time, the song's end theme is not a straight reprise of the opener, as it begins with different lyrics and a slightly different arrangement of the main title song. I personally think it's one of the weakest songs. I'm not a big fan of Lulu's style of singing, but surprisingly it's very catchy. It's an earworm. Once you hear it, it'll be stuck in your head and drive you mad for a week. Lulu's song is the only Bond title track that didn't chart in the US or UK. John Barry wasn't happy with the music he composed and the song, feeling it was the worst score he produced for the long-running series, saying, "It's the one I hate most, it just never happened for me." Creatives can be their own worst critic, and the score, considering the time he had, is not that bad at all. It's got a bit of a sexy jazz flavour to it. Barry reprises his tried and trusted action cues that are well placed to give that much needed action scenes a lift in excitement. Scaramanga's theme is not a traditional menacing motif, it has a sense of mystery to it which works. Other elements of the score have that eastern sound to it when Bond arrives in Hong Kong. I think the score does the movie justice, but it doesn't really bring much new to the table. If John Barry had more time to play with, perhaps he could have created something more memorable that would have left him satisfied. The score arrived on LP back in 1974 and would eventually get issued on CD in 1988 and then again in 2003. Though not the complete score, it's the same album since 1974. It's still easy to get hold of though and is very cheap on CD. Not the best 007 soundtrack, but certainly not as bad as John Barry makes out. Like many of the classic James Bond films, they were on UK TV a lot growing up, and I spent the majority of my youth watching Roger Moore as James Bond. The Man with the Golden Gun was one of the entries into the long-running series that I didn't watch that much. Live and Let Die, The Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker were repeated a lot throughout the late 80s and into the 90s, but Roger's second appearance as 007 less so from what I remember. The Golden Gun is often regarded as one of the weaker efforts of the Bond franchise, like Diamonds Are Forever, or later efforts such as Die Another Day and Quantum of Solace. Now, I don't think the film is that bad, but it fails to live up to the expectations of what you come to expect from a 007 adventure. Its problems are a result of its many script changes, and I would imagine its quick turnaround after Live and Let Die. Despite its quick turnaround, it did make a lot of money at the time, so it didn't lose anything for the studio, but audiences were given a film that lacks any real energy and passion for the material. The constant rewrites don't do the story any favours, especially with the subplot involving the Solex agitator. Now, Christopher Lee is certainly the highlight of the movie, giving a brilliant performance, making him one of the most memorable villains in the franchise. I love how he constructs his golden gun and how he wants to compete with 007, and tries to push the idea that they are the same. It made a big change for him, moving away from the Hammer horror films, always playing Dracula for so many years, and now getting the chance to play a smooth talking villain who could match Bond in a shootout. It was also good to see more of MI6 taking on a larger role in the film, instead of the usual approach of Bond getting his orders and they appear at the end, catching Bond in an awkward moment. Roger Moore is still kind of finding his footing in the role. He switches from being his own interpretation and then leaning more towards Sean Connery. Guy Hamilton on Live and Let Die said to Roger, "Don't copy Sean, just do your own version." Which he does, but the writing still has the flavour of Connery, and when Bond meets Andrea Anders, he gets quite aggressive and gives her the old Sean Connery slap, which seems so out of character for Roger's James Bond. Britt Ekland, who has the perfect look of a Bond girl, is sadly written to be a complete idiot, who is just desperate to sleep with Bond. This is Bond's assistant, who should also be a skilled spy, who has the opportunity to help James locate Scaramanga, and not just be this bumbling fool who accidentally finds herself being taken to his island. It's the 1970s though, a different way of writing women back then, and the Bond films most often had the ladies cast to be good looking, and that was their job. Maud Adams' character thankfully gets treated with a bit more respect, and she's not played for comedy, but she sadly gets killed for doing the right thing. Fundamentally, the story is the biggest issue. Firstly, the story is too long, and despite there being a lot of back and forth trying to get the Solex, the whole plot with the energy crisis is really underbaked. Gibson, who is the inventor of this new technology to combat the energy issue, is given little screen time and no dialogue. He gets sniped and then the information he provided is just relayed by HIP to MI6. We see 007 starting out with this being his main mission, but the story quickly shifts to discovering the identity and location of Scaramanga, which honestly should have been the main plot. The Solex is just a MacGuffin and takes up unnecessary time. We could have had a tighter film with the focus on Scaramanga, and for whatever reason he has created this ultimate weapon. Simple as that. We didn't need the energy crisis subplot crowbarred into it. Many go to watch a James Bond film for the action, but The Man with the Golden Gun doesn't really deliver in that department. The action is sparing, and when we do have some moments, it's all a bit uninspired and forgettable. We have 2 chases, one by car and one by boat. The car chase just consists of cars dodging each other and going from left to right within camera. We have some cars smash into one another, but it's so pedestrian with its execution, and the same for the boat chase, just seeing Bond again escaping with not much danger in his way. The best bit is Bond throwing the kid overboard for being such a pain. The famous car stunt is incredible, but the added sound effect still annoys me to this day. The sequence at the end for Bond's face-off against Scaramanga is quite cool, but clearly inspired by Enter the Dragon with the mirrors used to confuse Bond. It makes sense in the film, however, as Scaramanga has this fun, fair background, whereas in Enter the Dragon, it's used because it's interesting and looks cool. It doesn't really make sense for Mr. Hand to have this wall of mirrors. Bond cleverly uses Scaramanga's tricks against him, posing as a waxwork to confuse him and defeat Scaramanga. It's a nicely executed sequence. The film visually takes a step back in quality compared to Live and Let Die, as the film takes place during the day for most of it, which is fine, but the colours never seem to pop. It may be down to the transfer to Blu-ray, and when you see sets at Pinewood, everything is overly lit, like a TV show. And with the tight schedule, there's little camera setups, with many shots played out in one take, which shows the talents of the actors, but visually you end up with somewhat of a bland sequence that is played out in little shots for the lack of time they have. If you go back and watch Live and Let Die, it has a gritty vibe for the location scenes, and the set-bound locations have moody lighting. It just looks like more time has gone into the visual look of the movie, whereas Golden Gun, everything looks a bit flat and less like a big cinematic experience. Come The Spy Who Loved Me, it goes full epic and looks like a proper movie. I think the film did need a fresh pair of eyes on it. Guy Hamilton clearly just rushing to get the film done. It doesn't really bring much to it to make the action exciting and to liven up the pace of it, but with its short schedule the Bond producers wouldn't take the risk of getting someone else behind the camera. But perhaps they should have brought back Peter Hunt, who directed On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is far more impressive with its direction compared to the lethargic pace of Guy Hamilton's work. The Man with the Golden Gun is certainly one of the weaker efforts in the long-running franchise. Everyone knows it, it's not some recent realisation that it is a bit subpar. Many involved making it don't talk about it in positive terms. I think its biggest crime is that it's a bit boring. Its story needed more work done, it has a bloated runtime as it plods along and lacks the energy a Bond film at this point in time should have. But it's certainly not unwatchable. There are still some highlights to it and the film has its fans. If you're going through all the Bond films on a marathon, you are not going to want to skip it. Like I've said on some occasions when reviewing other films, it's a perfectly fine Sunday afternoon movie. You could be a bit hungover or just want to chill, and The Man with the Golden Gun would be a fine choice. Not complicated and easy to watch, but saying that, a James Bond film should be exciting and should pack a serious punch when it comes to the action, which this movie sadly lacks. But the Bond producers would thankfully correct their mistakes and give a new lease of life to James Bond with The Spy Who Loved Me. That would put the franchise back on top.
The death of 007. Mano a mano.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and click the bell to be notified of my latest retrospectives and reviews. Big thanks to my patrons for supporting the channel. If you want to get involved and gain early access to my content and exclusive videos, then follow the link below.